Alright, so let's get down to this. This is a very common scenario that I see all the time. Say you're in a bunch ride. You're maybe third or fourth in line, so you're drafting, which means that maybe you're pedaling at 90 to 100 RPM, pedaling very lightly but very fast because you're drafting, and then suddenly the road pitches up 2%, 5%, 8%, and then it holds it at that gradient. So what do? You shift, and then suddenly you run out of gear at the back, so you shift in front, going from the big ring to the small ring, and then bam, you drop your chain. I see it all the time, and this is the problem that I would like to address in this presentation. First, let's talk about what inexperienced riders do with their gears. Okay, you've got 11 speed. Some bikes now have a 12 speed. The reason why we have multiple speed bikes is that we are able to maintain our chosen cadence. Like for example, if you're climbing at a 2% gradient, right, and you're pedaling at 80 RPM, if the road pitches up to 5%, right, a lot of inexperienced riders, what they do is they shift to a lower gear, but at the same time they hope to maintain their speed, so they pedal faster. That's a big problem, right? You don't do that. When the road pitches up, you change gear but try to maintain your cadence. If you're 80 RPM at 2%, try to maintain 80 RPM at 5%, and you shift so that you will maintain 80 RPM, right? That's the main purpose of having multiple gears. It's not so you can maintain your speed, right? That's not how it works. So again, the main purpose of having multiple gears is so that you could maintain your chosen cadence. To share a technique that I've learned quite early in my cycling days. I happened to discover this on my own. I don't really know what it's called, and other cyclists are probably doing this as well, but I call it multi-shifting, and I'm hoping that this would address a common problem where you run out of gears or you drop your chain and so on. Now, as I've mentioned in my intro, the goal of having multiple gears is to maintain your chosen cadence. So when you're in a climb and you're doing 70 RPM and the road pitches up, you shift to a lower gear so that you can maintain your cadence. Now here's a very common scenario. Supposing you're in a climb, say 2% gradient, you're still in your big ring. So you've got a chain ring that's 50 to 34, and at the back you've got a cassette that's 11 to 28. So you're currently on the 25 tooth cog, right? So the combination is 50 and 25 at the back, so your gear ratio is 50 over 25, which is 2, right? Now it's a 2% gradient. Now supposing that the gradient suddenly changes to, say, from 2% to 5% to 8%. A lot of cyclists do this, right? Since the gradient is now unbearable, they go from the big chain ring to the small chain ring, so the ratio drops from 2 to 1.36. The problem here is that the chain tension has dropped as well. You're not just dropping the gear ratio, you're also dropping the chain tension, right? And so what happens is that your chain drops, right? Because your chain is floppy, so it drops, right? And this happens all the time. Now, some people do this instead. So coming from a 50-25 combo, instead of shifting to to the small ring, they do this instead, right? So coming from 25, they shift to their lowest gear, which is a 28, right? Which is fine, because that's a 2 to 1.786. The problem with this technique, though, is that you are now cross-chaining. So the chain will start rubbing on your front derailleur, and then all that noise. So it's bad for your front derailleur, it's bad for your chain, it's bad for your cassette. So how do you solve this problem? How do you solve both problems? Right, so let's go back to the original scenario. You're at a 2% gradient, you're still in your big ring, and you're on the 25 tooth cassette cog. Right? What I propose, right, is to do this. You multi-shift. So you click twice at the back, at the rear, right? And then you also click in front. So you're going from the big ring to the small ring. At the same time, you're also shifting at the back. So your ratio drops from 2 to 1.619. Right? What's the advantage of doing this? The chain tension is maintained, because when you shift to smaller cogs, the spring of the rear derailleur actually tightens. Right? It tightens because to remove the chain slack. Right? So your chain tension is maintained, you're not cross-chaining, and you've got 3 spare cogs. Right? That's the advantage of multi-shifting. Again, shift at the back and you shift in front. Right? So when the road keeps climbing, right? Keep shifting. So maybe it's now at 5%, and then it increases to 8%, so you shift again, and then it increases to 10, maybe 12%, so you're now in your lowest gear. You're at the peak of the climb, and the road flattens, and what a lot of cyclists do is from here they go to there. Right? From their small chain ring they go to the big ring, because the road has now flattened. Again, we're now back to the problem where we are cross-chained, and at the same time, it's difficult to maintain the cadence. So here, if you're spinning at 70 RPM, when you go from here to there, your cadence could drop to what, 50 or maybe 40 RPM. Right? That's bad. You're cross-chaining, you're not maintaining your cadence. So instead of doing that, right, do this instead. Right? As soon as the road starts to flatten, you shift at the back. Keep shifting, right? And then when you get to this point, right, before you shift to the big ring, you also shift at the back. So from here you do that again, so that your gear ratio doesn't jump too much. So from 1.6 it jumps to just 2, right? Again, you multi-shift. Shift at the back, shift in front. And then, yeah, you pedal faster, and then to maintain your cadence, and then you go faster, you keep shifting, and so on, right? And that's how multi-shifting works. So with multi-shifting, the thing to keep in mind is that you never shift in front without shifting at the back. And it's quite easy, right? Like in the case of Shimano shifters, the big shifters go to bigger rings, right? Big ring here, big cog here, right? And the smaller shifter goes to the small ring in front and smaller cogs at the back, right? So it means that every time you hit the big shifter in front, you also need to hit the big shifter at the back. So big, small, always. So again, never shift in front without shifting at the back as well. The way I do it is, since you double click at the back, right? Since you double click at the back, I normally click once, and then the second click at the back, I also click in front. And I do it when my foot, the pedal stroke, when I'm close to the dead spot, right? So if you're turning this way, you shift when your pedal is about this way, right? So you pedal in that arc, along that arc, because you don't want to be shifting while there's tension in the chain. right? So you go click, 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 you do that. So double click at the back, click in front, and by the time the pedal stroke gets to that point, you're already in your small ring. So you're in the big ring, you go click, 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 you're on the small ring. And then you're also shifted at the back, right? 2 gears at the back. And that's how you do it. That's multi-shifting. So I hope that you've learned something from this one, and I hope this would minimize your chain getting dropped. And I also hope that this would maximize the usage of your gear. Of course, this won't apply to those who are using one by. One by is inferior. You don't want that anyway. That's a subject of another discussion. But for now, again, multi-shift. Never shift in front without shifting at the back. Multi-shift always.